stream with Claire. I'm always looking forward to it because partly because I'm really grateful to have such an interesting personality, somebody as forward looking as Claire who's realized that Islam is taking over. Let's do the quick intro. So my name's Khalid. Um, I'm a Muslim. I do happiness classes in Speaker's Corner, like free open air park happiness classes based on Islam for everybody, even if you're not Muslim. And Claire, she's an agnostic who wants Sharia law to basically save the West. So just so you know what's happening, I've got my list of things I want to talk about on the screen. Would you like to add anything to that, Claire, to your introduction?
Not really. Your statement that I am an agnostic promoting Sharia is perfectly correct to restore government to sanity. And I think we need rules to base our laws on. I believe today we're talking about Sharia and the Ahmadi Muslims and their Khalifa.
Yeah, so thank you very much for reminding me what we're actually talking about. So, what is the difference between Ahmadi Muslims and other Muslims? Is that okay?
Um, yes,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, Ahmadi Muslims are better at being friendly towards non-Muslims. But maybe that's not quite fair. But I think that there is the other Muslims don't quite like you for some reason.
Oh yeah, that's right. I mean, there's one or two that like us. Okay, so yeah, so I asked Claire what she would like to talk about as sort of some sub questions on that. And so I'm going to whiz through so you know what you can look forward to in this discussion. We are going to whiz through them though, like just touch on lots of things that people don't seem to understand about us. So one is, why are Ahmadi Muslims the only ones with a Khalifa? That was one of Claire's questions. Another one is, why does the British government like Ahmadi Muslims so much? Is Islam violent, based on Christopher Hitchens' famous atheist who's passed away now. So we're going to talk about that. And I think it's kind of relevant for an Ahmadi Muslim to explain it, because our answer is quite different to a lot of other Muslims, because we're a lot less violent, or we're not really violent at all, really. Um, Difference in, so that was kind of what Claire's questions were. There was another one, but I took it off. What was it? There was some author who you felt was scared of mentioning us in her book
Oh,
about.
Ines Bowen.
Yeah, I mean, I could get the sense that it was possible, but it wasn't clear enough that she was scared, based on the thing you showed me in the introduction of the book, where she said we're just small in number, but I think we're not that small in number. We're growing very quickly. But anyway, but it wasn't clear enough, so I thought I'd just leave that one, if that's okay, sort of thing.
Mhm.
So like, yeah. And then I thought there were, what are the other big differences between us and other Muslims? And so we follow science rather than myths, and I'll talk about that, especially relating to how miracles work, and there's a lot of science behind that. And then there's the difference in beliefs based on the Quran, of course, not just made up. Signs. So what's special about us is that the thing that really stands out, if anything, is that we are the followers of the second coming of Jesus, or the Messiah, let's say. So I'll briefly talk about those. And that's, I mean, people who are interested in, especially Muslims who are interested in us, will be very interested in, how do we know that the Messiah, the second coming of Jesus, who everybody is waiting for, has actually come. Um, and then finally, I did tell you, Claire, I'm going to put you on the spot and say who you like the most. But I'll probably try. I'm going to try to break it down into parts. But anyway, that's what we're
Mhm.
looking forward to. We'll see what happens. So I'll make a quick comment on something and see what you, well, be interested what you've got to say. So starting off with, why are Ahmadi Muslims the only ones with a Khalifa? I think it's worth prefacing it with why do we need a Khalifa at all? Why do Muslims feel the need for a Khalifa? So, first of all, uh, there should be unity amongst Muslims. There shouldn't really be lots of sects. There should be no sects. It's not um, something. It's not the way Islam is supposed to be. There was supposed to be only Islam, not this group, that group. We as Ahmadi Muslims don't really see ourselves as a sect, but we just see ourselves as a true revival of Islam. And eventually, for the benefit of the whole world, we need a Khalifa to unite the world. And the Khalifa won't be a political leader, just be a spiritual leader, um, getting countries eventually, when countries listen to him, to engage with each other peacefully, and as he already is in many ways. Um, what do you think about that first reason for having a Khalifa? I'm not really answering quite yet. Why are we the only ones with a Khalifa? But as I think it's worth asking, why do we need a Khalifa at all? Why do you think that sense of unity, no sects, and aiming to unite the world sounds good? Any thoughts about that?
As I understand it, the Khalifa is the Muslim equivalent of the Pope. Am I right?
Yes, thank you for explaining that. Yes, I'm skipped that. There's loads of things I keep skipping. Yes, is a spiritual universe. Yeah, universal. Yeah, like the whole world, spiritual leader. Um, that's what followed Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. There were the four rightly guided caliphs, caliphs in English, who led all of the Muslims, and then it kind of broke down after that. But they were caliphs, but they weren't really considered truly spiritual. They were kind of political as well. Yeah.
Have there ever been more than one caliph at the same time?
I vaguely
Say,
remember something like that. There was one point at which I think at the time of the fourth caliph, some people said they want some other person. I think Muawiyah, and then there was a battle because you can't have two caliphs, so they had a battle. So he won out at the end, Muawiyah, sorry, and so he became the fifth caliph, really. So there shouldn't be two caliphs, yeah. And maybe there was another point in time, but it's not supposed to be two caliphs. It's supposed to be unity amongst all the Muslims. That's kind of the point, yeah. And then the second purpose that I thought about is spiritual leader or judge, who makes clear what's right and wrong if you're not sure about an interpretation of the Holy Quran. And that's really important. You find that in amongst the Ahmadi Muslims, we don't have terrorism, and we don't have violence, and that's because the Khalifa is constantly reminding us. So we are the most organized Muslims in the world, and so we have our own TV station, and all the Friday sermons that he gives, the Khalifa gives, the current Khalifa Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the fifth Khalifa, after the second coming of Jesus, or I'll just say promised Messiah. He, in the last one, I think it was the last one or the one before, he just reminded the Ahmadi Muslims, because we're constantly persecuted, he said, don't think that we're going to start fighting. We could, because we're the most organized, and we could easily fight back the mobs that attack us and kill us and things like that, but we don't. We don't have terrorism, we don't have fighting, and that's because we have that clear spiritual guidance, and the rest of the Muslims don't have that. They have one imam in charge of one mosque and another imam of another mosque. You got YouTubers mainly telling people what to do. They're not particularly the right people, and they'll just say sensational things as well, YouTubers, just to get more views. So we've got a spiritual leader, and quite the most important part of that spiritual leader is a spiritual leader, as we will talk about later on, hopefully, one guided by God himself. So we're not guided by views or random egos of YouTubers, but guided by God. Yeah, so what do you think about that, and just thoughts about that?
well, it sounds well and good. that you have a kind of pope, you have a hierarchy, and I think your imams are um, more trained than the others. You examine other religions too. You don't just know only Islam. Is that right?
Yeah,
You're supposed to
they
study
go on a
Judaism,
that's right.
Christianity, the other religions.
They go on a 7-year course, all funded by our own money, nobody else's money. We have sort of universities for imams around the world. Um, yeah, and they're all kind of overlooked by the Khalifa. The Khalifa is always checking on everything, making sure everything's up to scratch and things. And yeah, so we're very peaceful. Yeah. And then the other benefit, and that something you've experienced on
Mhm,
more than one occasion, I'd say, and you experienced the other day when you came for our a coronation party event. We're organising loads of them up and down the country.
mhm,
I organised one the day before the one you came in my back in my let's say my local few streets, and then there was a slightly
mhm,
bigger one at this mosque that you attended, which is the oldest mosque in the UK. It's called the London Mosque in Southfields, and you could see that we, because of our unity, we have actually a community, an actual thriving, constantly working community, which the other Muslims don't have. They just have, like I said before, they have individual mosques doing their own thing. There's no, this is your duty. These are your responsibilities within the community. Everybody in the community has some sort of role, and we're constantly working. We're never so like the fact that we're constantly working means that anytime something is asked of us, we're not like asleep, where it's like bang, all right, we're ready to do it. And but I would say we're very well trained, partly because we're doing voluntary things all the time. um so we are a lot more able than all other Muslims because of having a Khalifa. This is all emanates from having a Khalifa, the unity, the organization, things like that. Um, we're able to do things like pay for our own mosque, whereas whenever the other Muslims really have to ask either Saudi Arabia or the British government if they're in England or wherever they are, for money, or they ask YouTubers to raise funds and things, which I don't think is the best way.
mhm,
Yeah, so it makes us way more organized and capable of doing good things for the community, and that's something we will talk about later on, why we're popular amongst governments as well. We actually do something for the world. We're not just ideas. We're constantly doing things all over the world, all sorts of things, like water wells, creating little cities in poorer countries and things, to help people free of charge. um, and yeah, I like I mean, if I'm not going over the top about this, but the people in the community are very, let's say, are they, I could say very, I want to say they're sort of very ordinary people, but despite all our individual weaknesses, when we come together, we can do so many amazing things. Everybody's got their different skills, um, and we put together so many events that people are amazed when they see how well they're put together. I don't know. Any thoughts about that?
not really. Please carry on. I mean, obviously, I don't know that much about your organizational issues.
Hmm. Well, you went to another event earlier, you told me, at the largest mosque in Western Europe, the Beit Fatu in South London, Morden.
Mhm.
Did you experience any sort of, or notice anything about the organization there? Or even at the event you went the other day, in Southfields, like, did you notice anything about how it was organized? Or
That you were hospitable, you have you do a very nice chicken biryani. You have a library. There is a library there, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a library, bookshop, and things like that. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And maybe it went so smoothly you don't realize how organized it was because, like, yeah, that often is the case. I don't know. It makes me think about yeah, I'm gonna try to not sidetrack actually. Okay, so basically, yeah. So maybe when things run so smoothly, you don't realize how organized it is. For example, I did mention like when I was doing a little tour, all the food is cooked centrally. There's teams for that. There's teams for doing the gardening. That particular mosque that you went to, I think pretty much every year wins the award for best public garden, and it's all run by volunteers. Um, yeah,
Hmm.
each person doing a thing they particularly like doing. So certain people like doing gardening, they're really good at it and they do that, and as well as doing so many other jobs. So
Hmm.
yeah, okay, cool. So as I say, this is just a quick run through about a whole bunch of, I think, very important ideas. um uh I think it's quite I mean, definitely, a lot of people who are local to where I live, they are incredibly grateful to our Muslim community because we're the only ones who organize community events in the streets. We organized the last Jubilee party when the was it Jubilee, yeah, Queen's Jubilee. Um, Even the local person who's supposed to be in charge of the neighborhood says it's an absolute struggle to get anything done, because people want stuff, but they're not willing to commit to doing stuff, take
Hmm.
on responsibility. So
Hmm.
people see the power of what we do, and we do it so easily because we're a living community. So you just snap your fingers and we organize something that other people can't organize with great difficulty. We do it with ease. So yeah, and we raise money really quickly because we're always constantly donating small amounts or whatever. So we've got there are a huge amount of strengths of basically having a khalifa. That's the short version. Anyway, so how comes, let's finally answer the question, how comes Ahmadi Muslims are the only ones with a Khalifa? And the answer I'll give is, in short, because God chose us and based on a prophecy. And then I'll quickly whiz through some of the prophecies. Can you see, by the way, the thing I'm sharing on the screen?
Yes, I can
O-
read your
Okay, yeah.
document.
Oh,
Yes.
cool. So just to make it, because it's a little bit long prophecy, and you might get lost if. Is it big enough to read? I'm not going to
Um,
get you to. I'm going to read it, but I'm just going to make sure it's legible at least.
well, I can read it from where I am. Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'll just there are a couple of prophecies that all Muslims are waiting for, and they have been fulfilled by um, our spiritual leader, um, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the second coming of Jesus, and they also relate to having a Khalifa. So I'll quickly go through that. The first one: prophethood shall remain among you as long as Allah wills, and He will bring about its end and follow it with khilafat, leadership, spiritual Muslim leadership, on the precepts of prophethood. So I think precepts is a big word for me. I'd say sort of on the guidance or the teachings of prophethood, as long as He wills, and then He will bring about its end. Then kingship shall then follow, uh, to remain as long as Allah wills, and then it will come to an end. Then there shall be a monarchical despotism, which shall remain as long as Allah wills, and it will come to an end upon His decree. Then will then will sorry there will then emerge caliphate on the precepts, and I put forward slash guidance because I think it's an easier word to understand, of prophethood. Um, so that's a prophecy. And in short, it's saying there will be khalifas after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And then it would kind of become politicized, become a monarchy, and etc., more corrupt, not so spiritual versions. And then eventually it will, the spiritual, true spiritual Khilafat or Caliphate system will be restarted after prophethood emerges again. And so that's a well-known saying of Prophet Muhammad. And so, how was that fulfilled? Well, all sorts of caliphate systems continued all the way on to the Ottoman Caliphate, which ended in 1908. And in 1909, the caliphate system started after the Messiah, the second coming of Jesus, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. So that's one of the prophecies. So in short, I'm saying is that this prophecy was fulfilled for nobody else. It's a well-known prophecy. I suppose in short, I'm saying God chose us. Any thoughts about that?
So you're saying that the caliphate for Ahmadis began in 1908. Was that what you were
1909.
saying?
And the other
1909.
caliphate system, the corrupted system that eventually died out in the Ottoman Empire, ended in 1908.
Oh, I thought it was 1926
So
or
I checked that
something.
up. So officially, it died out in 19 whatever, but he gave up all power by 1908. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, either way, I mean, people might say, okay, maybe it was 90, I mean, I think it was 1924, 1926, whatever, right? That it somehow still existed, even though he didn't have power, just sitting on a throne or something.
Mhm.
It kind of doesn't change anything too much, really, because it's the idea that there was the prophecy says there was a caliphate system and it will eventually die out and then it will begin again after prophethood. So maybe if there was a slight overlap, I'm not sure if it makes much of a big deal. I think the key thing is that despite all the efforts of all the other Muslims, they simply cannot get a caliphate together, Khilafat together. That kind of if you really believe there's an all-powerful God, that should tell people something. It's like, okay, you believe God is all powerful, and the one group that everybody's got together to say they're not Muslims, which is us Ahmadi Muslims, they're the only ones who God has allowed, because you must say if God is all powerful, that means he allowed it to happen. They're the only ones to have a caliphate or khilafat system. Caliphate is a anglicized version, if you're wondering why I keep repeating both versions. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, I mean, I see on Wikipedia it talks about the government being an absolute monarchy, and I thought, it doesn't seem quite right because I think a caliph is meant to be a republican because a caliph is not a king.
Right. So that's what it got. It got corrupted into a sort of monarchy, but it was supposed to be really a spiritual leadership. Really, it's not necessary.
So how is your caliph? How did your caliph inherit the position from his father, or I mean, how is your caliph chosen?
Yeah. So it's just an election by an international council. I was gonna mention that next. I'm not sure if it's worth mentioning the other prophecy. I'm just thinking about before I go on to that. Is anything so? Is it worth mentioning? I'll say it in short without reading the whole thing. There's one more prophecy that might be worth mentioning, and it kind of helps emphasize the value of a caliphate system as well. So it says that in the past, the Jews and the Christians broke up into 70 lots of sects, 71, 70 sects, whatever. And so would the Muslims be broken up into 72 sects, except for there will be a 73rd group or a Jamaat, which means the community. And and so there'll be one of those and everybody else will be false or hell-bound. And so one of the things that the other Muslims say to us is that we got together, all the other Muslims got together and agreed that they are one, on one side, and we are on the other side, as it were. We're the false ones, and the 72 must be true. But Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said the exact opposite. He said there'll be only one that's true, and the rest will be false. So I'm often quite pleased when people tell us that we're the minority or the only one, and everybody else is grouped together to somehow, despite all their differences, because there are lots of crazy differences, a lot of idolatry, worshipping of saints and things amongst the other Muslims, but somehow they've got together and decided we are not Muslims. So I see that as a sign of our truth, and also the fact that the true community is supposed to be, was described by Prophet Muhammad in this saying and prophecy of his as the united community, the Jamaat, tells you the value of Khilafat itself. Essentially, this prophecy is saying there will be one true community, and there'll be a united community, and the only one you really have that is a caliphate system. So I just put that out for anybody who's interested. But let's get on to your next question, which is how's a Khalifa chosen? By an electoral committee that's chosen before the death of a Khalifa, and is chosen by a Khalifa. So there's people from around the world who are told as soon as the Khalifa dies, you have to be ready to come to the center, which at the moment is in London. And within a few days, I think within a week or so, they have an election, and whoever has the most votes gets elected as Khalifa until he dies.
So who would be the ones choosing the next
So
table?
it's about 100 or so men who are chosen from around the world from the previous Khalifa. They usually have already important roles within the community. When I say already, like
Are they sort of locked into the Sistine
yes, they are
Chapel
actually.
or the
Yeah, they
Muslim
are actually.
equivalent
So
of?
when they're elected, they're not allowed to, I don't think they're allowed to discuss what's happening. They have to do it within three days, and it's a secret election within the mosque. They're not allowed to be going in and out. I think it takes 3 days or maximum. Yeah. So I think it's very similar to what you might see from the Pope, as far as I remember. Oh, she's gone. Connection is gone. Hopefully she'll be back soon. Oh yeah. So if anybody's got questions, I see a comment. What's this? You think? Let's see. You think violence is necessary to ensure happy community? So you are into violence? No, I said exactly the opposite. I think you might have misunderstood. We'll be talking about more of that in a minute, but I literally said the opposite. Let me just read that again. So you think, while I'm waiting for, you can make more comments, by the way, Duck. I don't mind, Duck Buck. But I'm not sure how you understood that. So what's special? So other Muslims are violent to us. I think that's what I said. Maybe that's why you thought. But we don't believe in violence, and that's one of the things that distinguish us. I'm going to be talking about later on when I went through my list. I think Christopher Hitchens. Although I think he is willfully ignorant a lot of the time. I can see his point of view when he sees violent Muslims, and he kind of is put off by that. And I'll be talking about how the Ahmadi Muslim community fulfills a prophecy by Prophet Muhammad, who said that violent jihad will be ended in our time. So jihad, by the way, very often misunderstood, means struggle. And Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said the small jihad is a defensive war only, first of all. So it's not really violent. It's just kind of, well, it's violent in the sense that you have to fight, but it's actually defensive. But the big jihad is or the big struggle, because that's what jihad means, is to work on yourselves, work on the weaknesses within yourself. Yeah, hopefully Claire will be back, and feel free to keep asking more questions, Duck Buck. I don't really mind. But yeah, I'm glad you kind of asked that. I'm not sure how people got the idea that I was encouraging violence um, to ensure a happy community. I really don't get that. Anyway, um, cool. Maybe I'll go. Uh, let's. What else is there? Oh, what's happened to poor Claire's phone? Never mind. I will. Oh, internet connection. I will just keep whizzing through stuff, um, and then maybe I'll come back to things. Who knows? So, next one is, why does the British government like Ahmadi Muslims so much? This is another question that Claire had. I didn't realize I didn't really think about it that way, but I know that we invite people from all sorts of backgrounds, including MPs, different people, different religious leaders. We're always trying to get people together. We have these things called peace symposiums all around the world, all sorts of events constantly to get people together. So some of those people are, you know, MPs, members of parliament from the British government as well. You know, all over the world basically. And so what are the reasons I think that I thought about is everyone gets oh yes, so there was sort of a important question because of a well-known allegation against the Ahmadi Muslims, which is we are a plant of the British government. We've been created by the British government, and people say that because we came into existence at the time when the British ruled over India, and our community started in a very small village called Qadian. So, yeah. But the funny thing is, we're the only ones who pay for our own mosque because we're the only ones organized to do so. Organized enough to do so because we have a caliphate or khilafate system, and all the other Muslims, either have to beg Saudi Arabia because they've got lots of oil money for a mosque, or the British government, and a lot of the time it's the British government, and sometimes they raise a bit of money through YouTubers. I've seen those kind of adverts. Yeah, so that's kind of, it's worth saying. The next thing is why are we liked? Is, well, we preach patriotism, which is incredibly rare in most settings. People are not very patriotic in any setting nowadays, unfortunately. Certainly not Muslims. Muslims are. I've never heard them say anything patriotic. They like being pretty angry. If you look at the thumbnail put of one of the most famous Muslim YouTubers, Muhammad Hijab, he's pretty angry all the time for some reason. And so there's a saying of Prophet Muhammad. He says, love for one's country is part of faith. So it really should be that way. Generally, people are, let's say, Muslims are, just yeah, pretty angry people. Even at Speaker's Corner, we get a lot of harassment and violence against us, and persecution of all kinds, and yeah, we're not allowed to pray with them. All sorts of ridiculous things, completely unnecessary. Anyway. And the other reason why the British government probably likes us is because we're the largest organized group. So if politicians want votes and they know that here's one group that could potentially vote all together, although the Khalifa rarely ever says vote for one particular person, they're all not that particularly good anyway. So yeah, potentially. Oh, well, actually, just say potentially. But so we do get visits in our local chapters, the local parts of our community, because we've got like we've got international level, which is a Khalifa, then national levels of organization, and that's broken to smaller and smaller until it's just a few streets and things. And politicians come and visit us, and say, hey, we're really nice as well, and effectively say vote for us. So my point is that we're so organized. We're the only really organized people, organized Muslims. So inevitably, if they see a group of people who they can get all of their votes, then they will probably like us, I suppose. But I think I'm missing the main thing is we're just the nicest Muslims easily. Even the other Muslims agree on that effectively. And I'll probably talk about that later. I plan to talk about that later on. It's a shame Claire's gone, poor thing. I think I'll give her a call. Let's just see what's happening. You can hear her on speakerphone or something. I mean, I don't mind whizzing through it all by myself, but I think it's not even ringing. That's interesting. Something's not right in terms of connection. That's funny. Anyway, all right. So let's whiz through. Is Islam violent? Another question of Claire's, and she sent me a video by Christopher Hitchens, a famous atheist, and he made a few points, and I just thought, okay, I'll write down his points and then answer them. So he started by saying Sharia is horrible. Sharia is something that Claire wants implemented in the West to save the West from all its confusion problems and economic problems and things like that. So what is Sharia? It's actually just a spiritual law. So it can't really be forcibly implemented because the Quran says you cannot force religion. But if people choose to have Sharia because they think it's such a great way to live, then great. So let's talk about what is Sharia. Sharia is things like being nice to your mum. That's actually one of the teachings of Prophet Muhammad. So that's what Sharia means. Another example is chopping people's hands off if they're thieves, so to protect innocent people. But that's in a situation where the thieves have got everything they need, because in Islam, also part of Sharia is to give every person in the country all their basic needs. There's a teaching in the Quran about making sure they have shelter, water, clothing, and something else, food. Yeah, drink, water, food. Yeah, four things. Anyway, all the basics they should have. And so if they got all the basics, then they're not compelled to steal, and then yet they still steal, then there's something wrong. And yeah, so either chop their hands off, or you can take it metaphorically, basically stop their ability to steal. It seems violent, and but it's not really. It's basically a way of stopping people from being violent to each other. What I mean to say is that if you got such a scary um, law, people just don't steal anymore. But if we got really relaxed laws like we have in London and England, you just have robbery all the time. People are scared to go at night. But if you go to an Islamic country, people are out with their grandparents at midnight. The weather's better as well. You can do that, but people are pretty scared. I wouldn't really want to go at midnight out around in London. So yeah, you kind of I'd like to say also that the Islamic laws are not really about violence towards criminals. It starts much earlier so that criminals don't offend in the first place. Um, we do all sorts of things to make people's lives happier, if they make them less materialistic by giving them community, and endless things that so people feel happier and they don't feel to the need to try to find happiness through things or stealing things, etc. Anyway, feel free to ask questions if you want about that. So next is achieving Islamic State through jihad. So this is something Duck Buck might be interested in. I said I'd mention that what's special about Ahmadi Muslims is that we are fulfilling a prophecy of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said in the day, in when the second coming of Jesus comes, the metaphorical second coming of Jesus, because not literally the same Jesus, has come back. You never ever have that in religion. Even at the time of Jesus, somebody was supposed to come before him. the second coming of Elijah, and Jesus said it was only a metaphorical second coming. That's what he said in the Bible. But anyway, so so when this second coming of Jesus is supposed to come, according to Prophet Muhammad, he was supposed to do three things. Where have we got? He was supposed to break the cross, kill the pigs, and abolish the jizya tax, which is the tax that non-Muslims have to pay for protection, basically. So they don't even have to go for war for their own countries, right? And the Muslims also have to pay a tax, a bigger tax actually, to pay for everything else. So non-Muslims are treated really well in Muslim countries. They pay less tax. They don't even have to fight for their country. Yeah. Anyway, so basically, part of that prophecy. I mean, you really have to take some of these things metaphorically, because it's a bit ridiculous to believe they're literal. Claire's on the way back. She's coming up. The connection's almost there. Yeah, picture's coming. I'm going to add her back in.
I'm sorry
Hey,
about that.
that's all right. That's all right. I've got people commenting, and I've got my regular. What do they call it? Trolls coming. Harry. Hey, Harry. Live trolling. Appreciate it. Okay. Anyway, so
Hate
I was.
Watchers.
Sorry.
It's called Hate Watcher.
Oh, hate watcher, Harry, you're a hate watcher. Nice. Okay, you got a label. Anyway, so I was whizzing through some of the stuff, and so I got onto. I said, why do the British government like Ahmadi Muslims? I'll do the short version, which is. So first of all, it's in a way it's a sort of a loaded question. Not that you meant it to be, but one of the things where said about us all around the world is that we're a plant of the British government. Ever heard of that one?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yes. So I
That you're in
thought,
cahoots with them.
yeah, exactly. So the funny thing is, we are the only ones who pay for our own mosques, and all the other Muslims get the British government, if they live in England, to pay for their mosques, unless they get Saudi Arabia to pay for it, which that doesn't always happen. Like I think Regent's Park, the second biggest mosque, is half paid by. I was looking at the kind of plaque, and it looks like they're half paid by the British government as well. So yeah, so I mean, that aside, we're not doing. The British government is not doing a particularly good job of supporting us. They seem to be supporting everybody else everybody else
What
besides
what
us. Yep.
what is the name of the funding that the British government?
Oh, it's just that you just say your mosque is a charity, I suppose, and then you go,
Right.
oh, we need a bit of money, please, for our charity, and that's it, really. Community hall, as it were, but just for Muslims,
Oh,
that
you
kind
mean
of thing.
charity tax status?
Yeah, they call themselves a charity, and then they get money from the British government. That's what I understand happens, basically. Very easy to
Mhm.
call yourself a charity. So yeah, and then we're the only ones who preach patriotism, and that's part of Islam. I think most other groups, not just Muslims, most people are not very patriotic nowadays. I don't know what you think, but everybody's complaining and whining and want more rights and things, but they don't want any responsibility. So most people are complainers nowadays, and we're the only ones who are patriotic. And Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, "Love for one's country is part of your faith," which shouldn't be surprising because, quite frankly, Prophet Muhammad or the Quran teaches love for everybody is part of your faith, and the closest you're nearest in terms of relationship have the most rights. So, your mum, your brothers, sisters, your children, then it goes out to your community, and then it goes out to your country, I suppose, and then your world. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. You take care of your country, but you also try to take care of your world.
Charity
Um,
begins at home.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, what do you think about that? Like, do you think that could be a reason why British government likes us? I'm not sure why you said the British government likes us, because I didn't really ask you. But was it some sort of experience, something you've read?
Well, actually, it was years ago when I first went to the Is it Beitul Futu?
Beitul Futu, yeah. Beitul Futu means House of Victories, yeah. The biggest mosque in Western Europe, definitely in England as well. And yep, loads of events there. And you went to one of them, yeah. And what was your experience there that made you think British government liked us?
I think there was an MP there, so you often entertain MPs, and I think the
Yeah.
MP was saying, "Oh, if only all Muslims could be like you Muslims," and so I guess you are the pet Muslims of the British government.
Yeah, I mean,
Preacher's
loads.
pet.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, being good helps, not being
Mhm.
angry, being helpful to the community helps. And it's not just them. There's loads of people that stand out and people who generally are annoyed by Muslims, like Tommy Robinson, the ex-head of the EDL. He said that on Twitter once that if only all Muslims were like Ahmadi Muslims, you wouldn't have a problem with Muslims. So yeah, and then I'm just gonna have a quick look at anything if Harry's got anything interesting to say. Harry says Qadiani, that's an insult. I'm just putting all his what other insults have you got? You're not Muslims. By the way, Harry thinks you might not like us, but I told Harry being insulting doesn't actually help Claire think badly of us. I think maybe this might add to when we have to review what Claire thinks about Ahmadi Muslims versus other Muslims, we can see Harry versus me. Maybe we'll see. In terms of impression, Ghulam, that's Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the second coming of Jesus, says, didn't do any of that. And it's a shame Jesus it's the same Jesus that is supposed to return. So we'll talk about that, why the Quran disagrees with that. Ghulam was a British spy. Yeah, we talked about that. Married his own niece. I'm not sure about that. Calling Prophet Muhammad's hadith ridiculous. I'm not sure if I called his hadith sums me up. Yep, apparently. I'll always do this. I don't want people to be bored by this, but what are you talking about? My local mosque, I doubt that. Okay, I doubt his local mosque was paid by attendees. You have to pay a lot of money, and there's no organization in those mosques. Bring evidence. Well, there's lots of evidence of that. Mashallah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well, the thing is, Harry, if there's no level of organization and you don't know who to pay or trust, it's not possible that you're going to be able to pay for your mosques. I don't know how you organize before your mosque came into existence. If you didn't have a mosque, who would you pay to? But we have communities up and down the country, very organized. So yeah, it's just logical. Thank you very much for your kind comments, Imtiaz. And back to Harry. Are you planning on spreading Qadianis in Jordan? Yes, I am actually. Yes. He knows I'm going to Jordan. Great. You're a good troll. I appreciate you taking. Not that many people know about it. So me going to Jordan. You've never been to a Muslim mosque, have you? I've been to Los, yes. They take donations regularly. Nope, I've never seen that. Okay. So what else is there? Or okay, bring evidence. Saudi is paying for your mosque. Go to the plaque. Paying is for mosque. Oh, you don't know that Saudi is paying for mosque? That's kind of like public information. It's pretty common information. Go to the plaque in front of Regent's Park Mosque, one of the most famous mosques. If you're a regular at Speaker's Corner, it's not too far from there. So you'll find out the information there. We'll just Google it. Okay, so back to the main thing, but appreciate your. It doesn't really annoy me, Harry. Could be useful, some of the things you're saying. Okay, so yeah, and finally, we're the largest organized group of Muslims. So if politicians wanted votes, it makes sense to go to us and say, you know what, we like you, sort of thing. Please vote for us. As they usually do. We regularly have visits to our very small, let's call it chapters, or at our local level, where we have a couple of streets organized as the Wandsworth group, or the whatever Wandsworth Town group, or the whatever Ersfield group. we have all sorts of politicians visiting us and saying hello and telling us what what they'll do for the community and stuff. So it makes sense if there's an organized group to go to the organized group because it's an easy way to get votes. But I think the most important thing is, I think if we think reasonably of MPs, we're just the nicest Muslims, and even the other Muslims agree on that. And I'll give you an example. It's like when I go to Speaker's Corner and I say to a random Muslim, we should be nice to everybody. They go, "Are you an Ahmadi Muslim?" Like that's my experience of their immediate reaction. So it kind of we really do stand out, and people, I even get questioned as to why do we believe in being nice to everybody, because we're famous for a motto which is love for all, hatred for none. So in short, we're just the nicest, most organized Muslims, and it makes sense that people, including the British government as well as loads of other people, would like us. Any thoughts about that?
Did you do some kind of deal with the British colonialists in India?
No, don't remember any. There's no
Okay, I was
evidence.
just
So the thing is, we don't get any. If there was a deal, we don't really get much out of it. Nobody's paying for our mosques. We pay for our own mosques and things. So yeah. Yeah, so there's no evidence of any deal. It's just all sorts of empty claims by the other Muslims, as usual. When they've run out of things to say, they just make up conspiracies. And what can you do? Poor things. They've run out of things to insult us with, so they have to make up things, I suppose. Yeah, thank you. Nice to see my old friend Simon from Speaker's Corner, always saying nice things. Yes, I hope they do destroy Satan and come together. That'd be good. And Nara Takbir means, what does it mean exactly? It means like, have you heard of that? When all the Muslims go Nara Takbir, it means long live. Not really long live, but it's just kind of, I don't know. It's like,
uh,
I don't know what it means exactly. Have you ever said?
right. It sort of follows. It go
Yeah,
Takbir
they
and then
do.
Allahu Akbar,
Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest. Yeah, takbir.
and then that's followed by an explosion, usually in the mind of
Okay.
people, lots of people.
All right. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, of Westerners. Yeah,
It's like a war cry,
war
I
cry.
think.
Yeah, they're scared of the words Allahu Akbar, which just means God is the greatest. It doesn't mean I'm going to blow myself up. Unfortunately, that's what the other Muslims have kind of created that impression, unfortunately. But anyway, and also the media as well, they kind of hype that up. They take advantage of the few crazy, some crazy Muslims, let's say. What has Harry got to say? Now, the immediate reaction is, "You are Ahli Muslims?" Who says that? People I've met at Speaker's Corner. Your Ghulam was encouraging, what was he saying? Colonial rule. No, there's no evidence of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He did say nice things, though. He did say nice things to all the rulers. It's not a bad thing. I think it's a really good habit. Nowadays, people are always complaining against their rulers, but they don't realize that being a nice person and being grateful for all the things we do. So, for example, he said, "Thank you for giving us religious freedom," which we didn't have. Nobody had religious freedom. Everybody just tried to beat each other up in uh, British India, or before British India existed. So they brought some sort of rule of law into the country, and we just kind of appreciate that. I think people should just appreciate things and not complain so much. That's my thing. I don't really believe in protesting. I believe in just getting on with doing things, taking responsibility, stop complaining. There's so much complaining nowadays, and because people who complain, they think they've done something useful. Because the same people do absolutely nothing, most of them, for society. But there's plenty of people complaining and whinging. What do you think about that?
I'm sorry. What was the question again?
One of the reasons some Muslims claim, I think, like, let's see, Harry, um, he's encouraging his supporters to accept colonial rule. Okay, so we don't. We're patriotic. We also don't believe in fighting. Um, in Islam, you're only supposed to be allowed to fight if you're stopped from praying and defend yourself. And so Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the second coming of Jesus, or the Messiah, he was very kind to Queen Victoria. He wrote a book inviting her to Islam, and always thanked all the British for giving religious freedom, which we didn't have before, without the British, because there wasn't much of a rule of law before that. So yeah, I say, all I was saying to you was that nowadays everybody's complaining and fight, say we want this, we want that, right? But next to nobody has any sense of responsibility. And I think the people who do all the protesting, they think they've done something useful, and they've done their job by doing a day of protesting, when in fact they've basically done nothing. In fact, I would say the opposite, because they've got the sense that they've done something, where really to do something for the community is to have a long-standing attitude of responsibility. Today I'm going to do this for the community. Today I'm going to get people together and build a community to do something positive for the world. Protesting is really stupid generally, I would say. What do you think?
Well, it annoys a lot of people, I suppose, if you get in the way of well, you
It's
get
not really
arrested,
about annoying. It's just that you think you've done something useful. Asking for your rights, or asking for more rights, or complaining while having no sense of responsibility to make the world a better place. There's hardly anybody in my local community, I would say, is willing to stand up and do something and build their community. It's only the Ahmadi Muslims in my area who do anything. We do all the street parties and everything. So generally, Westerners are incredibly selfish. And I don't want to say in a mean way. They're nice enough people, nice enough human beings, but they're not. Their selfishness is that they don't actually take any responsibility for the world they live in long term, in building community and things like that. They might throw away a bit of rubbish, in the recycling bin and stuff like that, but not much else.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm really
Yeah.
so when Harry says basically we were nice to the British government when they were in India. Yeah, we were nice to everybody. I think that's the way it should be, and it's part of Islam not to fight your government and cause mischief and stuff like that. Anyway, yeah. So back to Christopher Hitchens. You shared a video with me, and then I thought I'd respond to different parts of what he said. His very short video. First of all, he said Sharia is horrible, and then I started by I explained this roughly before, but this, like, there's a saying of Prophet Muhammad about being nice to your mum, so that's part of Sharia. Sharia is also, cutting the hands of thieves, and I think that's a great rule, because you should protect the innocent. And when you have a tough law like that, people don't break the law at all. When you have lenient laws, you just have lots of people traumatized by being robbed again and again. And Islam is not just about those harsh laws, but it makes it so that you don't have to thieve. First of all, it gives you 4 basic rights of food, water, shelter, and clothing, I think it was, in the Quran. And but even more than that, it creates a beautiful community, so you're not greedy for stuff. So there's even, you're just happier with the things you do have, because actually, to be happy, you don't need lots of stuff. You just need connection, you need spirituality and things like that, which has been proven by psychologists. Anyway, so that's my first point. Sharia is not horrible. It's actually really good. I think you would agree, since you're trying to implement it all over the West. Any thoughts about Christopher Hitchens' comment, Sharia is horrible?
Well,
That was my
it's not. It's
paraphrasing of
not
what he said.
liberal.
Right.
It's not liberal, and I suppose a lot of liberals have the tendency to regard anything that isn't liberal as barbaric. But I don't. But even the term barbarism is really a kind of xenophobia, because apparently this was what the Greeks called the Persians. Um, because apparently they said ba ba ba, or their language sounded like ba ba ba,
Mm.
and it was really a Greek form of xenophobia.
Interesting history. Yeah. Yes, you made a good point. So that when people hear chopping people's hands off, the average Westerner doesn't really think too deeply about the consequences of it. They just think, "Oh, that's a horrible thing to do. How could you do such a horrible thing?" You know. But they don't really care about innocent people. Um, I effective. I would say you're basically spoiling society to protect the criminals, and you're encouraging criminality as well. And so, yeah, I don't believe in
Yeah,
spoiling
and they don't
people.
care as long as they, can pretend to themselves that they're so, caring and compassionate and tolerant and liberal. And I think the whole point of being civilized, I think, is if you look at the origin, the etymology, I think it's called, of the word civilized, you'll find that it's about living in cities. It is about being a citizen of a city, and it's basically about being a good citizen and the laws that are needed to control people when there is a concentration of people who live in a city. So you need different forms of organization that would be more sophisticated and probably more controlling than if you lived, in as a nomadic tribe.
Hmm.
So, if you live in the city, then the rules have to change, and you will have to be more considerate of your neighbours because you live in higher concentrations of people. And if you don't observe the rules, then life could quickly get very unpleasant if you don't obey the rules. So it's nothing about letting criminals go. You actually have to control them pretty rigorously to see that criminal behaviour doesn't get out of control.
Yeah, and if once you have that criminal behavior in control, you have such a lovely place to live. Where I was talking about earlier on in Islamic countries, where people aren't scared of each other and they're chilling out at 12 o'clock at midnight with their grandmothers and things like that. So, um, yeah, there's a lot to be gained by having these laws. And what else is there? Then he's talked about achieving Islamic State through jihad. First of all, um, you cannot implement Sharia law by force because the Quran says there's no compulsion in religion. The only way you can implement it is if people, everybody, or let's say whatever, vote for it or want it in because they see Sharia law as the most advanced system. So if they like it, they can have it. And you can't force it through jihad. I'm saying jihad like a Westerner to make it more understandable, maybe. But jihad basically means struggle, and the main form of struggle is to fight the badness within yourself. But the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said
The greater jihad is the struggle
that's
with
right, and the
oneself.
smaller jihad it being a defensive war when you're stopped from
Mm.
essentially practicing your faith, which doesn't happen. So there's the Ahmadi Muslims have a specific answer that's special to them in that we have stopped practicing violent jihad according to a prophecy of Prophet Muhammad. He said that when the second coming of Jesus comes, he will break the cross, kill the pigs, and abolish the jizya tax. And so, if you're really smart, you realize that Jesus was not going to go around the world literally breaking crosses or killing pigs. That would be a really weird thing to do. But of course, most Muslims take these things literally, unfortunately. And again, if those other things, breaking the cross and killing pigs, is not taken literally and trying to understand the metaphor behind it, then you'd understand the jizya tax is also a metaphor. Basically, the jizya tax is a tax that foreigners have to pay. Say foreigners, no, say non-Muslims have to pay in a Muslim country for protection, so they don't even have to go for war they don't have to go to war to protect their own country. Muslims have to put their lives at risk for them, and often it's from my experience, is pretty much always a lower tax than the Muslims have to pay the zakat.
Would you call it a tax that non-Muslims have to pay in order to escape from conscription?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, and so basically, in short, the second coming of Jesus, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, um, says that we do not do violent jihad anymore. We've got a jihad of the pen, is what we're famous for. This is a time to. There's no need for violence.
The pen is more powerful than the sword.
It
The
is,
pen is
especially.
mightier than the sword.
That's true, yeah. And so we win by arguments. I'm in speaker's corner. Nobody can beat my debate, me in debate there. It's on video. I keep debating so many people, including Muslims. So that's one. And the next thing is Muslims have a special. What have I made? What's this point I've made here? I don't even understand it. Muslims have a special right to be angry and demand Sharia. I've got no idea what that means. Oh, sorry, that's what Christopher Hitchens said, that Muslims feel they have a special right to be angry, and they do seem to get angry quite a lot, don't they? And Ahmadi Muslims don't react like that at all. It's quite embarrassing when you have on camera every time everything that happens. You've got Muslims getting crazy on camera, being very violent and angry, and they sometimes demand Sharia. I'm not sure. What's your experience?
Well, I think was there something about Anjan Chowdhury? He was demanding Sharia, but that was years ago
I'm
before he
not
went
saying
to
it doesn't
prison.
happen, but I'm saying to what extent, because I think they do these polls, but I'm not sure how much I trust the polls, especially if they're done by the Sun tabloids and things like that, where they say lots of Muslims want Sharia. I want Sharia. Okay, I could be one of those votes. Uh, but yeah, I think you want Sharia, so maybe there are lots of people. Yeah. But anyway, the point is we can't force Sharia. But I agree with Christopher Hitchens that it is quite disgusting how Muslims act in an angry way. I don't say all Muslims, but enough Muslims to embarrass all the other Muslims on TV with all their angry, violent protests. Um, Ahmadi Muslims never do that. So if
Mhm.
everybody was like Ahmadi Muslims, you would never have those embarrassing pictures of violent Muslims on Western TV. So yeah, I mean,
Mm.
what do you think? What do you think about that?
Um, well, I suppose you need to. Um, why do they hate? I suppose they think you're sellouts and you've done some sort of deal with the Western government, and that's why you're um, getting special treatment or something of that nature. While they feel they haven't sold out, but this is just what they say.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, there's no evidence of that. We pay for our own mosques. And
Mhm.
um, also, the main point really is Prophet Muhammad didn't behave like that. It's actually, I would be ashamed if any Muslim said Prophet Muhammad behaved in this angry, violent way. He was so soft and kind that once like Abu Bakr, eventually the first Khalifa, he was being insulted in the presence of Prophet Muhammad, and eventually Abu Bakr said something in rebuke, and Prophet Muhammad left his side and effectively told him, "You shouldn't even said anything. Just keep quiet, let them give their abuse, and don't. You can respond calmly, but if people are not listening, even in the Quran it says if people are not listening, if they're ignorant, you just leave them alone. Say peace be upon him. So that's literally what the Quran says. If somebody's ignorant and they're not listening, just leave them and say peace be upon them, peace be upon you. So there's no sense of anger, even if there's somebody's rude to you. You say peace be upon you. So there's nothing supporting their angry, violent protests. I would say Prophet Muhammad was very soft, very caring, not rude. Didn't There's so many examples,
Do
famous
you know this
examples.
story of? I, I remember reading the biography of Muhammad by Karen Armstrong, and she said
Okay.
there was a moment when I forget which of his companions, but one of his companions visited the Prophet Muhammad in his home, and he saw that his wives were not being very respectful and rebuked. I think it was one of the wives saying, "How can you speak to our prophet in this way?" And then I think that there was some story about the Prophet Muhammad moving out.
I can't remember the details, but there are lots of small situations where Prophet Muhammad kept quiet, and then even some of the other companions would tell off. Like I think Abu Bakr, which again, like I said, was the first Khalifa eventually, told of his daughter, I think Aisha, who was one of the wives of Prophet Muhammad, for behaving in a certain way, and he said, "Leave her alone," like he was playing music or making a lot of noise or something like that. Can't remember what it was. So he was very soft. Um, um, yeah, he didn't like.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh yes, and that there was some unfavorable treaty which all the Muslims were angry with him for doing because it was perceived as being so humiliating.
yeah.
And he lost a lot of support at one time. Perhaps you know about that. I'm a bit vague about which
Yeah,
battle it
sure. There
was.
was that. There was basically said if any Muslim chooses to leave us, then nobody, the opposing, the Meccans at the time, or the people against the Muslims, don't have to bring them back. We're happy for them to stay away if they don't want to be with us. But if somebody from who's captured by the enemy, let's say, who is a Muslim and comes to us for refuge, we as Muslims will send them back, and things like that. And it seemed really unfair. But at the end, because the Prophet had a lot of foresight, it actually worked out in our favor, or in the Muslims' favor. First of all, we don't need people who don't want to be with us as Muslims, so they're free to go. And the Muslims who stayed back in sort of captivity in a way, became a growing influence as well. The good example of the Muslims. So it just worked out. It always worked out
Mhm,
for Muslims in the long term. So
mhm,
yeah, he's very soft and things like that.
mhm.
So yeah, so we don't demand Sharia, Christopher Hitchens. Peace be on you, or God rest on you. How what did I say? God rest your
God rest your soul,
yeah,
maybe.
God rest your soul.
Mhm.
Um,
But talking
yeah.
about Christopher Hitchens, I suppose I feel I should make this point about the First Amendment. Would
Mm.
you say that the First Amendment is based on Chapter 2, verse 256, which says there is no compulsion in belief, truth stands clear from error?
Yeah. So again, the First Amendment is what? The freedom of conscience? Is that's an American thing,
Freedom
isn't it?
of expression and freedom of belief.
Yeah. So yeah, they're one and the same thing. Yeah,
Hmm,
yeah,
hmm,
yeah. And yeah, and I would like to add, like I think again, Christopher Hitchens wouldn't have a problem with Muslims if they were all Ahmadi Muslims, because we're just not violent. We don't we don't look as crazy as a lot of the other Muslims do on TV and say horrible things, and we don't have any terrorists, because we have clear directions. Like I mean, you're definitely going to have terrorists amongst the other Muslims if even the Muslims are told that it's good to kill Ahmadi Muslims or other Muslims. You get to heaven if you do that. They're literally told that all the time. They're told lots of things like kill the mothers of Ahmadi Muslims, so you don't have children, they don't have children, all sorts of ugly, violent things with nothing to do with Islam. So if they're told that, they're going to be, what else are they told?
hmm.
Um, and yeah, and it's not just one or two examples. I'm persecuted in Speaker's Corner, and it should be embarrassing for them, and they're quite proud of it somehow.
What do
Um,
they do to you?
Oh, they say I'm not allowed to pray with them anymore. They threaten me, like they're saying, "Why are you in the park?" So, Speaker's Corner. That's what we do here. We
Oh,
talk. Yeah. So yeah, and they don't even want to be on camera when they're being rude, or aggressive, because they know, like, I'll just give an answer and it'll be more embarrassing for them. Um, okay, so any thoughts about Christopher Hitchens saying Islam is violent and whatever?
well, I suppose people of his generation would be um, outraged at the at 9/11, and any suggestion that Westerners might like to change their ways for their own good. But then I think Christopher Hitchens was basically sucking up to the Americans as a British man. And I think he, to make it big in America, he had to
Yeah.
do that and support the neocons and support American imperialism. So it would be part of his role to do that, I imagine.
Yeah, he was, playing the British guy with the accent and the white jacket, as if he was still in British India or something. Do you know the white jacket uniform with the
Yes,
fancy
yes, the
hat? Yeah, yeah,
flannel. Yes, the
yeah, yeah.
linen
So
jacket. Mm.
is it the villain jacket? When
But
they're in
the
British
white
India,
linen
they tend
jacket
to,
and the what do you call it? The hat. It's not called a
yeah,
boater, but
yeah.
fedora. No, something else. I forget.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
quite close to a sort of fedora sort of hat. But anyway,
yeah.
but he didn't have that. But he was playing a role, and I think he was willfully ignorant of Islam. I don't think you can insult Islam for so long and not learn anything about it in all that time. So anyway, but we wish him the best in the next life. No, no, no anger there. Anyway, uh, next point: difference in following science rather than myths. So, Ahmadi Muslims follow science, and the rest of the Muslims are really quite happy to follow all sorts of strange myths they haven't really thought through. And I'll give you an example about, and I think this could be interesting to not just Muslims but Christians and other people, and that is the parting of the Red Sea, Moses parting the Red Sea. So just a quick, I'm actually trying to get through lots of points really quickly. So let's see how quickly I can do this. So first of all, the Hebrew of the text that refers to Red Sea is actually mistranslated. If you YouTube it, Google it, whatever, it's actually supposed to be the Sea of Reeds. I think I spelt sea wrong there. Let's correct that. Anyway, Sea of Reeds, and the area which people are slowly sort of converging on as to where that Sea of Reeds are is sort of the northern part of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Suez sort of area. And even Napoleon's army went through that same place where they narrowly managed to go over dry land, but then because of the windy conditions, um, water came surging in. It's called a storm surge. So what you can have sometimes, and so it's a lot less dramatic than you might have seen in those really old films where you've got a literal wall, uh, the Red Sea parting. It's more like a shallow part of the sea where you've got reeds and all sorts of I can't remember what else there is. And if water suddenly comes back into a certain place, just like when you fill up, I don't know, a bottle or something. Have you never noticed when you fill up a bottle and it goes up and then it goes back down because you filled up really quickly? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I've never
No?
noticed
Okay. I
that.
mean, try it again or
I-
something. Okay. So
Right.
sometimes when
Uh-huh.
water rushes back in, it goes higher and then it settles down. And that short period of going up and then going down would have been enough to kill the pharaoh if he was trapped in there. If it was violent enough. So anyway, that's just a scientific and more historically accurate way of looking at um, miracles. We don't believe miracles are uh, break scientific laws. Even things like yeah, I'm going to try to not go into too many different ideas, but that's one thing. There's ever heard of the Isra or Mirage? It's like this Prophet Muhammad flew, as it were, to the Al Aqsa Mosque, and then he went back, and then he went up into the heavens, and he met different. Do you know about this story?
Yes, people do mention it and wonder if they expect it to
Right.
believe it.
So a lot of Muslims think it's literal, but I've just, there's so many things that, I mean, I believe it happened in the dream form as a vision. And the reason why that has to be logically is because there was no Al Aqsa Mosque at the time. So which mosque did he visit? You know, it was built after he passed away. So yeah, it's just there's lots of small logical things that tell us that, and they're beautiful yeah, but beautiful morals to these visions, and they're totally lost on these other Muslims who take it um, literally. Like, for example, Prophet Muhammad went to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and all the prophets prayed behind him. I don't know. What do you think that means? If that wasn't literal and supposed to be a metaphor for something, what do you think that means? If all the
And
prophets were to pray,
all the previous
yes,
prophets were
yes,
behind
praying
him
behind him, what do you think that could possibly mean?
because he was the last prophet, and therefore he would be the last one, and the ones before would be well,
Well,
behind
it,
him.
it means that all the prophets would be united behind him, or all the people therefore would be united behind him. He would be the prophet that would unite humanity. Is that can you see that that could be an understanding or interpretation?
Yes, being the prophet with the final message from God for the whole of humanity, when previous scripture was for one group of people, like the
Hmm.
Torah, only for
Yeah, so
Jews.
they're all tribal religions before, because humanity wasn't ready for an international religion. They didn't have that level of communication. Islam comes along, first religion to say is for all of humanity. And yeah, so I think there's a beautiful metaphor, you know, all the prophets praying behind him. I think it's not too hard to realize that it means, you know, that all those previous prophets of different religions, all which were all from God, were now to come together, unifying all of humanity. So anyway, that's one way. And then there's another embarrassing thing that a lot of Muslims do, which is deny evolution. So this is again something that us Muslims are different from a lot of other Muslims. There are Muslims on their own, kind of like, you know, they realize you can't really deny the existence of evolution. So that, just to clarify, evolution doesn't deny the existence of God. There are people who say evolution is a random process, okay, and it's all, you know, we're all made by accident. That's a way of denying God. But evolution by itself just means things were created in stages, which definitely is not against the teachings of Islam. But anyway, so the reason why these Muslims deny evolution is there's a verse of the Holy Quran, or a couple of verses of the Holy Quran, where it says, God says be, and it was, like the universe, for example. Okay, for example, chapter 2 verse 117. But at the same time, the whole universe is described as being expanding, as growing. So the point is that, sure, the Big Bang happened with no effort to God. God did it easily, but it's not the same universe we have right now that we had in the beginning. So the idea that things are developing or evolving is definitely not against the teachings of Islam. In fact, in the second verse of the Quran, when God is introduced, he's called the Lord of all the worlds, is the Rub, which basically means a creator who creates in stages or develops. So it's basically the Quran, right in the beginning of the Quran, is saying that the God is the evolver. So what do you think about Muslims denying? Okay, so yeah, any thoughts? I can ask you a specific question. So, what do you think about Muslims believing that miracle? They believe that the laws of science are suspended at times through miracles and things. Does that make them sound scientific?
No, not at all. But I thought the Prophet Muhammad
Peace be
was
upon him.
a successful military and political leader who didn't perform a single miracle. I thought that was the story. But
Maybe. I mean, people say,
he didn't perform any
oh
miracles,
yeah,
did
he
he?
didn't,
Did he?
like, yeah, not in the sort of like
He didn't turn any,
water to wine.
water into
That's a
wine,
good point.
and will feed the one, the what, the how many thousands
Yeah,
of
500 or so. I can't remember what it was
people?
Jesus did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah, not those kind of miracles. I think it's a miracle that Islam expanded so incredibly fast. Most historians would say that that kind of miracle is about it. The Quran's a miracle.
But
Yeah.
it's a book of
Yeah.
deals. I mean, I've been saying to people that really it's, it's like the art of the deal, because the whole conception of Islam is that, well, you don't have to convert to Islam if you've lost the war to us, but if you do convert to Islam, you won't have to pay the jizya, and if you do convert to Islam, we can go and attack a third
Uh,
country and extract the jizya from them,
I
and
don't think that's how it works, but
presumably
yeah.
that.
I mean, first of all, it's not very particularly tantalizing to say you don't have to pay the jizya, because then you'd have to pay the zakat, which is even more, and you'd have to put your life on the line. So I'm not sure if that would be. That's not the reason why Islam exploded across, you know, across the world. Uh,
Oh, I thought there was a point when so many countries were just saying, no, no, we will, we'll convert and we'll just go and attack the other country, next to us, and that was the reason why
so
it was so
statistically,
successful.
most people converted when there was no war, because they just like looked to the Muslims and say, "Yeah, I want to be like that kind of thing." Yeah.
Ah,
So I mean,
right, right.
yeah, I mean, that's a whole interesting discussion. How did such a powerless people take over the greatest empires of the time? Like one historian, non-Muslim historian, said that it was like the Eskimos in our days taking over America and Russia, you know, like because the
Mhm,
Muslims took over Persia and the Roman Empire, so very long-standing empires. So with ease. Anyway,
mm.
so yep. And then another thing I get questioned about is why, as Ahmadi Muslims in Speaker's Corner and different places and comments on my videos, so how can you say love for all, hatred for none? And I'll give a quick answer. Prophet Muhammad again in the Quran is said he is to be a mercy to all people, chapter 21 verse 107. Yeah, so that's a quick answer to that. What do you think? Should we have love for all, hatred for none? Or do you think if Prophet Muhammad is supposed to be a mercy to all people, does that mean he loved all people?
Yes, and I suppose his message is would help improve the governments of so many countries if followed
Yeah.
properly.
And would you say, why do you think Muslims are confused when I say, or Ahmadi Muslims say, love for all, hatred for none, is our belief? Whereas in the Quran, it says Prophet Muhammad is supposed to be a mercy to all people. Do you think there's any contradiction between the phrase love for all, hatred for none, and being merciful to everybody?
Um, that seems pretty consistent with a message of mercy.
Cool. Okay, thanks. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to make sure, people who seem to have a problem with that, I'm just wondering why they have a problem with that. Maybe they haven't read the whole Quran or something. Um, so, yeah.
Well, I mean, these Christians are supposed to be so peaceful, but they took over the whole world, so maybe they kind of instinctively forget about the peaceful bits when they are at
Yeah,
war.
yeah. When you've got money, when it's money to be made, countries to be taken and stuff like that, then you might forget the teachings of Jesus, like offer the other cheek, which would be a really hard way to win a war. Imagine you turn up to somebody else's country, they slap you on one side, and you just offer the other, then the other, then the other. You get nowhere. Um,
All four of your
yeah,
cheeks.
it would be endless. It'd be quite a show, I think. Anyway, so I don't want to make this too long. So people inevitably ask, what are the signs of the Messiah? You know, but you might say, well, this is not really the difference between Ahmadi Muslims and Muslims. Maybe the different. I'll make it really quick because I don't want to make this particular too. I would say the difference is that the other Muslims don't seem to be particularly interested in following these prophecies that are fulfilled. And I'll just lay them out very quickly. One of them, I'm not going to read it all now, but basically the eclipse of the sun and the moon in the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is an Islamic month. On very specific days. Again, I'm not going to do it because I'm just trying to speed through this. They happened exactly. And so, what do the other Muslims say? They say this saying of Prophet Muhammad is a fake. And then I would say, if it was a fake, that's a bit weird, because then what you're claiming, other Muslims, is that somebody made up a prophecy that was fulfilled perfectly for a lying prophet, according to them. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, second coming of Jesus, Matthew, whatever. It's just, I mean, do you see the problem? If it was a fake prophecy and it was fulfilled perfectly, then what is God doing? Why is God allowing this? Can you see the issue with claiming that it's a fake prophecy? And everybody knows this prophecy has existed for over 1,000 years. So, I mean, any thoughts about that? I don't want to stick on to this too much, but I want to, any thoughts about that?
Not particularly. I suppose, all the prophecies and, those that don't come true. I mean, the believers will say, "Oh, we got the date wrong. It will be sometime in
No,
the
what I mean to
future."
say
So
is
they
that,
start
okay,
there.
you can say there's a prophecy that was false, right? But if it gets fulfilled perfectly, and at the same time you believe there's an all-powerful, all-seeing, all-knowledgeable God, then I'm saying from the perspective of other Muslims, why can you see the problem with believing that a fake prophecy is fulfilled for a fake prophet while God is watching and allowing it? Can you see the problem?
Well, I'm thinking in particular of the Christians, because obviously the Jews don't, accept the prophethood of Jesus. So, but the Christians do, but I suppose if you're not Christian, you'll say, well, we don't think he is a prophet,
It's yeah.
and because he didn't fulfill the prophecies, you're going to say, oh, he's going to come again. And I suppose if he came again and nothing happened, you're going to say he's going to come a third time.
Let me put you in their shoes, the Muslims' shoes. I am currently dragging this out a little bit, but I'm just trying to clarify something. Say you're not an Ahmadi Muslim, and you say this prophecy is a fake prophecy, even though now it's been fulfilled. And I would say, well, why did God allow a fake prophecy to be fulfilled? Because he is in control of the sun and the moon. What would be your answer?
Well, I suppose if I were to challenge it, I would say, well, in fact, it wasn't fulfilled, and you're lying. I guess if I were
Yeah.
determined to,
I think that's the best way.
reject
Yeah,
what
I
you
think
said.
that would be the best defense. It wasn't fulfilled. And so people would need to just inspect the prophecy and see if it was fulfilled. And the great thing about this prophecy is that, you've got NASA, which tracks prophecy, not prophecy, sorry, the sun and the moon's positions, and it's got calculators. You can actually easily track if it happened or not. You don't have to be there. So that's that. Very simple prophecy, and again, I'm doing this really quickly. Jesus is supposed to descend east of Damascus. This is a very simple one. It might be a bit vague, but Qadian, the insult that we get, like Harry, it's supposed to be an insult. We're called Qadianis, basically, instead of calling us Ahmadi Muslims, which we say we
What is Cardion
it's not
insulting?
really particularly insult. It's not a very good insult. Basically, Qadian is a town where the community started, where Mirza Ghulam Ahmad lived. And yeah, they say Qadianis, people who come from Qadian, rather than calling us Ahmadi Muslims. They thought maybe that's a clever insult in some way. But anyway, but I kind of take it as I quite like it because it just reminds them and us of a prophecy, which is that second coming of Jesus is supposed to come east of Damascus. And you might say, oh, east of Damascus, that's a bit vague. You should check it out on a map sometime. Go to see Damascus on Google Maps, see Qadian, and see how perfectly east Qadian is. It's a small prophecy, but a simple and easy, clear one to check. So just that little point there. Does that make sense what I was just talking about? I'm just clarifying. I mean, did you understand what I meant by the
Is it
prophecy?
on the same? Is it
I can't
latitude or
remember the word,
longitude?
but like if you look in Google Maps, you could probably draw a
Mm,
perfectly horizontal line and you'll see, yeah,
mm.
Qadian just there, east of Damascus. So
Oh,
anyway, it's a small thing.
right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I should go into this, but I'll talk about it very quickly. So there's the Antichrist that's supposed to come at the time of the second coming of Jesus and the Mahdi. Um, and so a lot of Muslims take it literally that there will be there'll be an evil sort of devil. The Dajjal is the word used, and I'm going to ask you in a second what you think, who or what this Antichrist is in the Quran, in the Quran, in the sayings of Prophet Muhammad. Dajjal literally is an Arabic word which basically means sort of great deceiver. Okay. And he is prophesied to make the good look bad and the bad look good. I mean, the bad look, yeah, the bad look good. So, like, sinful things look good, and good things made to look bad. He's blind. It'd be interesting if you can interpret this thing: blind in the right eye, but his left eye is protruding or really powerful. Any thoughts about that at all? Who could this great deceiver be? Do you think there's a bloke or a devil or something, or especially like the great arch rival of the Messiah in the latter days? Do you recognize this thing in any way? Try to be
I think
metaphorical.
you're somebody with an eye patch.
Oh no, okay, never mind. Basically, it's the Western powers good at deceiving, very materialistic. So right generally means good or spiritual things, and left means
Oh,
material things. So they're very materialistic, but that's not the end of it. There's a lot of things that clarify it. Like for example, Prophet Muhammad said, if you want to protect yourself from this antichrist when he comes, then all you have to do is know by heart the first 10 and last 10 verses of a certain chapter. And if you look at that chapter, it's all about, the first 10 are about the Trinity and the people who believe in the Trinity, and the last 10 are about people who believe in or follow materialistic things, or use materialism as their god, basically. So people should be able to add one and one and realize who the Antichrist are. And I'll add one and one for you if you haven't can't, which is basically, I'm not saying you, Claire, but anybody else out there, it's the Western
mhm.
powers. And there's a lot more to it, but I am going to, I think I'll move on. Okay. And so, yes, the best bit. What does Claire think is the difference between Ahmadi Muslims and others? So you don't even have to say you don't like the other ones. I mean, I love everybody anyway. But what would you say is? No, you have an open-ended question, and I might break it down into parts. But any thoughts? What do you feel is the difference between Ahmadi Muslims and others, especially from all the stuff I just said for the last hour or so?
Their peaceful nature and their non-violent vows, I guess.
Cool, and that's good for me. I like that. I mean, I asked when we were at that coronation party, very peaceful coronation party, everybody having a great time. Also, strangers eating together. I talked to a few speakers corners friends, and one of them, and this is good for other Muslims to kind of think about. I said, how do you feel about other Muslims? And she said, I'll be scared to go to their mosque, because she goes to speakers corner and she sees how violent they are, and they see how unviolent I am or peaceful, so you're more likely. I mean, I would like Islam not to have such a bad name in many ways, even though it's growing really quickly, because I so what I'm saying is I would like Muslims to behave better and have a better reputation. So I want them to think about this, like being rude and violent and nasty, is not helping your cause. It's not clever, is my sort of point on that. What have I got here? What do you think of the violence and intolerance of most Muslims towards Ahmadi Muslims? Any thoughts about that?
Well, I suppose it's because they think you get on better with the Western imperialists, and for this reason, they would consider you to be suspect, I guess. but you say they don't even pay for your mosque, so um, that charge doesn't stick.
Hmm.
But I suppose if they want to think that, they'll think whatever they like.
Okay, let's put it a different way. Yeah, that's I can see that's their perspective, but I'm trying to get your perspective. Like, what was I going to say? I mean, does it give you a good impression? Like, if there's a bit of a bit of persecuting going on by the other Muslims, does it make you say, yeah, that's the kind of that's what that really attracts me? Like, imagine, do you know what I'm saying? If the I hope I'm not sure if I'm explaining it well. So let's say there's ex-Muslim person X, and he's being violent towards me as an Ahmadi Muslim. Does it make you feel clear that you feel attracted to X's personality and say, yes, I want to become a Muslim because that guy is so violent. I love violence. I mean, is there any sort of, I don't know, maybe I'm leading the question in some way, but I'm just trying to.
I yeah. I'm not really sure what you mean.
So
I
maybe the
suppose.
question's so weird, but because like people like Harry, who and some of his friends who think it's really good to be violent and hateful, he, I think he gets the impression that you, Claire, might be impressed by his rudeness and violence, and not violence actually. He's just commenting, but other people. But I'm sure he supports that aggression. I think some of these people get the impression that they're giving a good impression about Islam and encouraging people like you, Claire, to become Muslims by being violent. I mean, does it encourage you? Do you get put on? Do you get excited by the violence?
No, but I imagine, young men who want to fight will find the idea of something that well glorifies violence. I suppose that's a usual thing that Islamophobes accuse Muslims of, glorifying violence. But then a lot of things glorify violence. Lots of Hollywood movies, lots of war movies, lots of
Hmm.
so.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, they're watching Hollywood movies and they think the terrorists in those Hollywood movies are the ones to copy. Maybe, I don't know.
mm,
They probably got the
mm,
wrong message from those movies. What do you think? I'm going to go through the comments really quickly, maybe in reverse order or something,
mhm.
in a bit. But what do you think of Muslims being led by YouTubers rather than a Khalifa? So, you got Muhammad Hijab. He's quite aggressive and angry a lot of the time. Do you know Muhammad Hijab?
Oh yes, he's often at Speaker's Corner. He alternates with Ali Dawa, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see him very often, but yeah, I mean, but he does get quite angry. I mean, I don't know if you've seen his latest videos. He seems to be, you know, he thinks it's, I don't know, somehow cool or something to be angry. I don't ever act like him. So, what do you think about the idea of Muslims being led by YouTubers? Because that seems to be, at the moment, eh, YouTubers seem to be filling that void. You don't really have the imams leading as well as much as YouTubers do. Can you see that that's what's going to happen because YouTubers have a far greater reach than any of their imams? So you've got sort of YouTubers telling Muslims how to behave or leading the way rather than a Khalifa. So do you think there's any pros and cons either way?
You guys don't seem to have a channel, do you?
Yeah, we do. We
Or
have
do you?
channels. We have lots of YouTube channels as well. But if you want to check it out on YouTube, we've got a constant live stream. It's called MTA International, Muslim Television Ahmadiyya International. Just search MTA Live or something on YouTube, and you'll see all our
Mhm.
channels in lots of different languages. So it's good you asked that. Um, so
And you have a digital radio station too, don't
yeah,
you?
we got all sorts of things. I think we were the first Muslim people to have a satellite channel as well and things like that. So because we're just the most organized, so we can get things done quickly. Yeah, so we got lots of things. Yeah. What's this other
Mhm.
one? What version of Islam do you prefer, Ahmadi or any other? Do you have anything that stands out? You can say non-Ahmadi. There might be Wahhabi that you like or something. Anything that stands out and why? You know.
I suppose sometimes Salafis kind of take the Quran literally, don't they? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that there's something to do with the interpretation of it, but even Salafis are kind of well, I mean, the hardcore, aren't they? I
Yeah,
mean,
they
or they take.
literally they have a lot of strange beliefs. Like, for example, one of the big differences, I thought I was going to cover it, but somehow I missed it. Oh, I missed it. Okay, number 5 I missed, but anyway, I'll leave it maybe. So I'll roughly touch on it. They have a belief that Jesus literally went to God or was raised to God after he was put on the cross, which is really weird considering the Quran says in so many times that God is everywhere. God is in the heavens and the earth. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. God is wherever you are. God is like, how many times does God have to say he's everywhere? And yet, when Jesus was put on the cross, the Quran says he was raised to us. They think he was literally raised to us. But the same words, by the way, just in case anybody's confused about it, the same words Rafat used or translated as raised, poorly translated as raised, is also the same words the Quran uses to say when Muslims pray, they are raised to God as well, or they are raised. You know, it kind of
Mhm.
makes sense. It's a spiritual raising. You can't be raised to God. God is everywhere. So anyway, so yes, they take things literally. It doesn't really make sense when you take things literally. They have all sorts of strange beliefs. They have a belief that God is hovering above a throne. I don't know why God would be stuck above a throne. It's kind of a weird imprisonment, like God doesn't need a throne, first of all. He doesn't, doesn't have a balm or anything. You know what I mean? He's not going to sit down or relax on a throne. He's all powerful. He doesn't need to sit down. So
Mhm.
it really doesn't make sense. They really do things, take things literally. It's a bit weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, because I think the idea is that God is not like anything that we have ever seen or experienced. So, we're not supposed to really speculate that, he's just another, human being like Zeus or something.
Yeah, so when the Quran said God is above the throne, you're not supposed to take it literally. It would be really weird and kind of doesn't make any sense, and it contradicts most of the Quran, the rest of the Quran. Anyway, I'll whiz through. I'll end this with, but I'll try to whiz through some of these comments, reverse order, so I might get bored of it. Because there is a lot of trolling. Oh God, Khalid says Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has no miracles. Actually, I don't believe I said that. I said he did have miracles. The Quran was a miracle that took over the whole world really quickly. Just not, turning water into wine. I mean, do you remember what I said? I don't know. Maybe you didn't hear that. I mean, yeah. I mean, any thoughts about that, Claire?
Um, about what?
About
Sorry,
oh,
about
can
the
you see the comment that I clicked on in the screen? Apparently, I said
oh
that
yes,
Prophet Muhammad had no miracles. You said he had no miracles, and I said that his miracle was the Quran first and
it was
foremost.
a Quran.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and taking over the world so quickly, and so many other things like that. So anyway, he's wrong there.
Hmm.
Ha ha, laughing out loud or something like that. Okay, thanks for your comment. What do you call yourself? A Muslim, an Ahmadi Muslim? An Ahmadi Muslim is the temporary name we give ourselves while we take over the world. Until there's only Ahmadi Muslims, then that point we would just call ourselves Muslims. Harry's got another comment. Thanks, Harry, by the way, for improving the ratings of the live stream with all your comments. What are you talking about? Who said you go to heaven even if you kill Qadianis? Yeah, just use Google, you'll find lots of that. What else? I mean, you should just watch some videos, Harry. YouTube, like Ahmadi is being persecuted all the time. Oh, just come and meet me I'll show you videos or two. Anyway, love Karen Armstrong. Yeah, I love her as well. Yeah, great historian, great personality, saying a lot of great things about Muslims. And I think I'll just do two more, then I'll be a bit bored. I think, let me see, what's this? This country has government and the majority of the people are non-Muslims, and so Sharia cannot be implemented in the UK. Oh, that's a question for you, Claire. Harry says that we don't have enough Muslims to implement Sharia law. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm saying if the British people in general want to know if they're male or female and want a bit of social conservatism, want law supporting marriage, um, well, that's the only way to go because there's nothing else around, is there?
Yeah. So, Harry, hope you like Claire's answer. I actually like this question, Harry. How did he break the cross? So I did say it's metaphorical. So he's got the most powerful Mirza Ghulam Ahmad has got and Ahmadi Muslims have got the most powerful arguments against Christianity, other than three can't equal one, and one of them that the other Muslims don't help in is that the other Muslims basically give Jesus superpowers. They say that he floated off into the sky and is still alive for the last 2,000 years, etc. That's not in line with the Quran, as I just mentioned, about the verse about raising to God. But the only people, and this is, I made a great video, really interesting video about this at Speaker's Corner, Jesus in India, and I'm going to make a second video. The first video is based on the Bible, a fantastic story that if you can, it's kind of like what was that Darren Brown's book, the the Da Vinci Code or something, like the secret story within the Bible.
Oh yes,
Yeah, it's very
yes,
much
yes.
like that. Do check it out.
Dan Brown.
Dan, was it Dan Brown?
Dan Brown. I
Yeah,
think Dan
Darren Brown's a
Brown is
magician.
the
Yeah, the
showman. Yeah.
showman. Yeah, wrong Darren. Yeah. Anyway,
Mm.
so yeah, I won't go into too much, but it's a fantastic story that's kind of hidden in plain sight in the Bible. For example, just to touch on one thing, when Jesus was taken off the cross, the person who was in charge, the Roman counselor, or whatever they're called, Pontius Pilate, who was, first of all, he was shocked that Jesus had died because it's only been a few hours and it takes 3 days to kill a person on the cross. It's actually a drawn out process. And then when he was put in the cave, he was they put all sorts of ointments on him, which are famous for curing, burns and things like aloe vera, and tons of it, like 75 kilograms of it or something, ridiculous amount put on by a very rich follower of Jesus. And then Jesus himself prophesied that, no sign will be given except for the sign of Jonah, which is Jonah did not die in the belly of the whale and come back to life. He survived. And it was a very clear prophecy, 3 days, 3 nights in the belly of the earth, blah, blah, blah. You can check it out. Check out the video, and I'm going to do a similar video based on the Holy Quran, where, for just one example of a quote from the Holy Quran, it says Jesus and his mother Mary would be given safe haven. And I'm going to ask you a question, Claire, to see what you think about this. The Quran says Jesus and his mother were given safe haven in a high elevated place with green valleys, springs and waterfalls. Now, do you remember any part of the Bible where Jesus was given and his mother were given safe haven?
I don't remember anything about
Yeah, it
that.
didn't. I mean, that didn't seem the case when he was being put on the cross, was it?
No.
So all the Muslims believe that he wasn't killed, including Ahmadi Muslims. But there's a great story to be told about how he survived and went to India, where there were tribes, Israelite tribes, historically known to be there, in many other places. And yeah, anyway, thank you so much for having me, Claire. Do you want to say anything? Last words?
No. I mean, thank you for telling me about how you operate and all the incidental information you gave me. That was very interesting, and I look forward to the videos that you say you will be making.
Yeah, and I'm always really thankful. Our videos are, wow, 2 hours when it's supposed to be 1 hour. So you are very kind. I really appreciate it. And you're not just like any old person. I would say you're a visionary to realize, Islam is taking over, and even as a non-Muslim, I do hope you become a Muslim soon, sooner or later. But as a
Mhm.
non-Muslim, to realize the value Islam brings to the world and how it solves all of the world's problems. So yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me on this live stream. Thank you. Peace be upon you.
Thank you, and the same to you.
Bye.